Welcome to another episode of the Inner Success Story podcast. And this season 5, is on toxic relationships. And today we will be talking a little bit more about toxic partners. Some of it is about my own experience, and I completely get that it is often a shock to the system when you realize that you are in a toxic relationship with somebody. And I remember feeling very conflicted by the fact that I was having to accept that this had happened again. I had to accept that I had fallen into the same traps again, the same patterns again. And it's really challenging. So I wanted to take you through that a little bit more today. It may well be that you're already toying with the idea that your relationship is toxic and how you want to manage that and what response you want to give for that. But there are also some things that I just wanted to reassure you are normal in that situation, and the pathway of what happens and the various options available to you. Okay, so when we get into a relationship with somebody, it is because we feel that there is going to be a return on the investment that we made, that we feel that what we put into the relationship, we are going to get in return. And even within a toxic relationship, there may have been a period of time that happened. There may have been a period of time where you were committed to the relationship and seemingly they were too. And so it's a really hard pill to swallow when you realize that that initial investment isn't actually now being continued. So for some people, it's quite intense. It becomes love bombing. And love bombing, so where somebody is so focused on you and is literally showering you with gifts and praise and validation and attention and affection. It just feels lovely, particularly if your past relationships have all been quite challenging. When somebody gives you this thing that you have wanted for so long, it is intoxicating. It is really clever and it draws you in. And love bombing is a way to get you invested heavily to the exclusion of all others. And when I say the exclusion of all others, I don't mean other potential partners. I mean that level of investment that will make you choose your partner over seeing your friends, seeing your family, doing things for yourself. And just for clarity, love bombing isn't always an intentional manipulation for that. Sometimes there is just an intensity at the beginning of the relationship. And whilst it is definitely a red flag, it is also something that we love and that we love to pretend isn't love bombing. It's just the excitement at the beginning. So it's really challenging because it draws us in. It draws us in to go, this person hears me and sees me and gets me and wants to provide what I've not had before. And I'm not saying everybody who shows you deep love very quickly has terrible intentions. I'm not even saying that it is always the case that that person is then going to turn into somebody very toxic in your life or narcissistic or a narcissist. And as we spoke last week, there is a difference between the two. It's just so easy to be drawn in. On the other side of that, you also have a situation where it has been drip fed. It hasn't been love bombing. It has been a slow integration. You've taken your own time. You have done your own thing. You've come together and had dates. Like, what's the worst thing is that a toxic relationship doesn't always have a pattern to start with. It doesn't always follow if this, and this is a toxic relationship. If you experience love bombing at the beginning, it is more likely that your relationship will take a toxic turn at some point. Not saying it's for every single one. Sometimes people find each other and they know. And again, that's part of the problem, because you can just say, well, if you know, you know. There's no prattling around. There's no, playing games and what have you. We knew. But a relationship has to be two individuals moving together and leaning in to create the relationship while still retaining their individuality. As soon as your individuality starts to be taken by this other person, that is when the problems really start. And actually, when you can put yourself in quite a dangerous situation. Now, that is so much easier to happen if you have never established a strong self-concept in the first place. If you do not have unshakable understanding of who you are, what offer you bring to the world, what's important to you, what your values are, what you love, being able to spend time alone, then it is so much easier for somebody to vacuum out your elements of personality until you mold yourself to being the other person. So we joke in our family, we've got a family member who, if they get into a relationship, they automatically morph into being the other person. They take on their hobbies, they take on their interests, they take on their humor, they take on all of their likes and dislikes around sort of television programs and everything. It's always been like a here we go again kind of situation. Who are we going to get this time? Oh my God, self-worth and belief. Sorry, complete brain fart moment then. Self-worth and self-belief are so important, and you have to keep them as yours. It's so super important that you are able to validate yourself, you are able to love yourself. And there ought to be a test, I think. Have I got this strong enough to even think about exploring the idea of a relationship? Because if you haven't, then a relationship is less likely to be successful because you're not your own individual person. You're more likely to be sucked into a situation that is not going to be healthy for you. And we're only talking about the beginning at this point. So I remember it taking an awful lot to accept that my marriage was unhappy, toxic, and previous relationships before that. I had experienced some physical abuse in previous relationships. I had experienced quite a lot of mental abuse and emotional abuse, not mental, sorry. I mean, I know that mental and emotional come very close together, but certainly it would fit into emotional abuse much more than anything else. And when we get into a relationship, we don't want to be looking for the danger signs, the red flags. We want to give the person the benefit of the doubt until they give us a reason to doubt them. We want to trust somebody before they give us a reason to not trust them. And they are all really, really lovely traits. But one thing that love isn't is strategic. But one thing that dating needs to be is strategic. It's really, really, really challenging. It's why AI can't replicate love. It's why love and relationships is so frustrating and challenging, because realistically, if you look at it, there are a ton of people in the world who are looking for love, who are looking for a partner, who are looking for somebody to share their life with. So why is it so difficult? Why is it so challenging to get that when there's so many people wanting that? It's such a complex situation, and it's difficult because sometimes it is a bit of a numbers game. You meet somebody, you have a strong self-concept, you assess whether they could be a good fit for you, and you start to explore that connection more. The problem is that as soon as you feel like there is a bond with that person, you forget all of the other stuff. You forget the things that you're checking in with. You forget, is this a values match? You forget all of that because you get swept up in it. You get swept up in the perceived love and affection. And actually, there's a new term for that period of time. It's lumi something, but I can't remember. Is it luminescent? No, that's not the right word. That's to do with light. Can't remember, but I'll come back to you on that one. And you fall into this trap of thinking like the lust and the attention are all things that are going to be long-standing and real. So you get into this relationship, you're giving investment, they're giving some investment, maybe not as much as you are, maybe it's quite equal, maybe it's more on their side at the start. And then you get into the relationship and you get into the routine. So I don't believe that you can really see if a relationship is for you long term until you have been through the phase where it's not the honeymoon period anymore. That's one of the main things that I think is problematic in all of the dating shows. So if you look at Married at First Sight, if you look at Love is Blind, they are put into a very fake situation, sometimes for quite a prolonged time. And then they put the situation into their real life and it doesn't fit. So once you've got over that honeymoon period, once you have moved beyond the can't keep your hands off each other all the time, etc., once you've moved past that and real life integrates properly into it, then you can really look at whether the relationship is going to be healthy. And it's very challenging to keep your head during that time to make sure that you are still able to spot if actually something isn't going to be a good fit for you. And there's a lot of, jokey things on the internet at the moment about expectations. Some of them actually aren't jokey, but there's a thing about women are going to need to lower their expectations. So you try not to look for the perfect partner, but it is okay to have standards. It is okay to have things that are not acceptable. And it is okay to stand for those really, really, really early on. So for me, I wanted to feel like somebody was thinking about me. I wanted to feel like somebody was giving me their attention. I wanted to feel like I was important because I was putting my eggs into somebody's basket and I wanted to make sure that that was reciprocated. And, after some time, when the relationship starts to become toxic, there are different things that come out. So there is, people can only keep their game face for so long before they start to falter. So then irritability starts to come in, behavior with family and friends, you start to see a little bit more, being dismissed. There are so many relationship coaches who are on Instagram, for example, who talk about relationship issues that start to become a problem. And really, every single one of those comes into unseen, unheard, unappreciated. And when you start to get to the situation where you carry the mental load, because I'm sorry, no matter what anybody says, women carry more than men do. I don't believe that there are as many men by any extent who are carrying the same mental load, unless perhaps they are single parents with full responsibility for the children. But for the most part, women are the ones who carry the emotional and mental load within their relationship. They are the ones who are sorting out everything. And it is very, very difficult to maintain your own identity when you are an employee or a business owner, and a wife or a partner and a mum. It's very, very difficult to make sure that the relationship is still beneficial to you when life just takes over and there's so much. I've seen a client this morning who just feels so super overwhelmed with everything, but it makes her feel unappreciated at times when her partner doesn't recognize that, when she is the one who's still carrying everything in that relationship. That doesn't necessarily make it toxic, but it does make it super hard to keep your self-concept. So what can happen over time is a relationship is the bit that becomes the problem. You become unappreciated, unseen, unheard. But worse than that, there are other traits that come in. So you're blamed. The other person doesn't take ownership and responsibility. You feel that everything is laid at your door. there's double standards, there's elements where you just feel completely eroded and you feel yourself ebbing away until you get to a stage where you're like, actually, this is not okay. But sometimes there are situations that really undermine your sense of confidence, and real toxic traits start to creep in, like, you're nothing without me. You should be so grateful and lucky that you're with me. And you just keep getting loaded on and loaded on and loaded on until you feel that you're essentially buried and there is nothing of you left. But the most damaging toxic relationships are where that has ebbed away very, very slowly. So you start off in your little honeymoon phase, you build a relationship together. Slowly, your confidence and your self-concept are eroded. Then other elements of life come in and take over, like having children, having a busy career. All of these elements come in, and you don't really realize for ages. And then, because it has been drip fed over such a long period of time, you then feel, I don't even have the confidence to leave. It's like if you're being bullied at work and you don't necessarily realize, but you realize that you're feeling less and less happy and less satisfied in that role. But then when you think about leaving to get another role, you're so horrified and anxiety ridden with the whole idea of moving on, that you stay where you are uncomfortable but comfortable. You stay in that situation because it's kind of better the devil you know than the devil you don't. The difference between that situation at work and a relationship is that you don't have to go to another relationship. But then equally, that provides its own problems because, and I did a poll on LinkedIn recently, which is the biggest challenge? And there was a high proportion of people who said being alone. Being alone and being lonely are very, very different things. One of the things that we are not taught is aloneness, how to enjoy time alone. And I used to be that person. I lived on my own for a period of time, but I kept myself so busy that I never really understood aloneness and how to be with myself. Now, I am fiercely protective of ensuring that I have alone time, and actually to the extent that I can be quite if I'm not getting some time on my own. It's super important to me to have that. I went and took myself off to the cinema the other week. There was a film I wanted to see. Nobody else in my household wanted to see it. I didn't feel like reaching out to friends to see it. And in the end, I went on my own, and I love going to the cinema on my own. And so many people are like, oh my God, what if people notice? Nobody will notice. Nobody will notice. It's nobody is thinking about why you're sitting in the cinema on your own. As it was, the cinema was full apart from the seat next to me, which was delicious. So I got like a couple of seats to myself, got to watch a movie. It was lovely. But learning how to be alone, because if you think about it, you have been in a home as a child, so you've had people around you generally. You have been in school, people around you. You have been to university, perhaps people around you. You've maybe had a house share, people around you. It's not really until you are single and you are living on your own that you have your first opportunity to really understand how to be able to be with yourself. And I really strongly feel that nobody should be getting into a long-term relationship until they've had that. I think it would solve a lot of problems. So learning to be alone is hard at first, and then it becomes delicious. And when it becomes delicious, you're probably ready then, if you wanted to explore another relationship, to then get into one because you've created your self-concept. You're okay being on your own. And that means then the other person has to be bringing something to your table. The other person has to contribute to the relationship. You then have certainty about what's important in a relationship and what you need. And therefore, if that person isn't bringing that to the table, you can cull and move on. I know that that sounds really cold and very strategic, but I genuinely believe that when it comes to finding a life partner, it is strategic. planning that is required, that is missing for a lot of people because they get swept up in the emotion of it. And I get it. I've been there so many times, but I do think that that is what is super, super important. I've no idea how long I've been talking now, but probably quite a while. No relationship can exist healthily when there is no sense of there being two individuals who've leaned in together to be stronger. It is very challenging and really down to chance if your relationship works when you don't have self-concept, or when neither of you do and you're almost like codependent. Like I say, the problem is there are no hard and fast rules about what works and what doesn't. So an arranged marriage can be incredibly successful with two people who are very, very close together because there's been some strategic planning often in that match. It can actually work better than some marriages. But obviously for others, there is abuse involved and what have you. If you date for ages, I've heard so many stories of people who dated and dated and dated and got married after 15, 20 years. And then as soon as they got married, it all went to pot. There are no hard and fast rules. All you can do is focus on keeping a sense of self and walking into that relationship, making sure that both people are bringing something to the table and that the scales are evenly balanced. So it's not one person who pays for everything. It's not one person who carries the mental load. It's not one person who is constantly the planner and the doer. It is not one person who gives the affection. There's got to be this balance. And sometimes you've got nothing to give and the other person gives, and other times they've got nothing to give and the scales balance out the other way. And across the relationship, there should be constantly this balance. Toxic relationships erode so much from you that make you then trapped in the situation. And the best route out is to, within that relationship, start to redevelop your sense of identity. Even if you feel that it would not be safe for you to do that within your own home, you start to work out what makes you happy. You start to work out what your life would look like moving beyond that and feeling happy, even if that means being alone. You start to create a financial pot of money. I had a secret job when I was married that my husband didn't know anything about because I needed to get myself financially more secure. And I had worked out that the only way that I was going to be able to live was to get rid of my debt. And I couldn't get rid of my debt on my own whilst contributing to the house. I had to have a secret job that gave me a pot of money that allowed me to pay the debt off, which meant that I was more financially secure leaving. And leaving is one of the hardest parts. I really, really understand that. And people who know your situation will say to you, just leave. And it's just not as simple as that. But I'm not going to get into that today because it is a bigger part. I actually don't teach you how to date. I guide you and teach you how to enjoy and grow your own self-concept. So if you then decide to walk into another relationship, that you can help and make sure that you are putting yourself in the best situation, and also a bit more aware of what to look out for and what your needs are. Like, what do you need? What does somebody else need to bring to your table? The other thing that I do is I support people as they are experiencing whether they should leave their relationship or not. It's not my job to tell you what or when to leave, but it is my job to start to build you up and help you to make the right decision for you at the right point. I carried a lot of shame that I should have left my relationship much earlier than I did, but the reality was that I left when it was the right time for me. So again, I'm not going to get into this in depth today, but leaving a toxic relationship has to be done at the right point for you. Now, if your relationship is abusive, please be aware that actually there are a whole other load of things that you have to consider about leaving an abusive relationship. But when it comes to leaving a relationship that is toxic, I felt a lot of shame that I hadn't left earlier than I did. But the reality was I left at the right point to make sure that I didn't go back. Because had I have been in a situation where I was more vulnerable, he'd have pulled me back in. We'd have probably had another baby together, and I would have felt more trapped with two children in that situation to escape from than one. Don't let anybody tell you when you need to leave. My mum said to me, you will know. You will know one day. You will wake up and you will know that that is the day that you're going to go. And that's exactly what happened. And it's not up to anybody else to work out when you should leave. It's up to you. It's up to you to be able to put things in place. But the most important thing is to leave when you're strong enough to not go back. So I hope in terms of toxic partners, that has given you some insight, that has been useful for you in looking out what it is that's important in a relationship and why toxic partners cause such a problem for us. If you need my help, my inbox is always open. You can WhatsApp me, and all the details are either, if you're watching this on the email series, then it will be in the email that I've sent you. You can just respond to that. Nobody else sees the responses but me. And if you are listening to that as part of the podcast episode, then the information will be in the show notes. I will see you again next week for another installment. Thank you so much for joining me, and take care of yourself.